Thank you very much, Mr. President Pahor. And now I would like to invite our distinguished panelists to take the floor, please. I would like to welcome our distinguished panelists and say that currently we're still waiting for Prime Minister Morawiecki to join us. We're very happy that he's going to be able to join us later on. And with this, I would like to start actually with a short introduction. And I would like to cite one of the founding fathers of the European Union, Robert Schuman, who said that it is in Europe's interest to become the master of its destiny. Europe needs to live better by pooling all its resources. It must become a functioning whole, a functioning unity. The enlargement of the EU to the Western Balkans should be the next stage of the EU becoming what Robert Schuman called a functioning whole. A geopolitical space of education, of creativity, of prosperity, of democracy, of peace, solidarity. However, there is no denying that the EU enlargement process has slowed down. But even so, we can highlight several important aspects in this process of the EU integration, such as the ongoing dialogue between the EU and the Western Balkan states on the transformational aspects of integration. Internalization of the EU acquis by the Western Balkans through concrete and practical steps. The emphasis on mutual respect, understanding, and interdependence. And yet, some skeptical voices, such as late historian Tony Judd, label this idea. Welcome, Prime Minister Morawiecki. Late historian Tony Judd labeled this idea of the united European continent as a grand illusion. He claimed that historically inherited differences between the Western and the Eastern Europe are not such to be easily bridged. Western European countries, for example, have become nation states gradually, whereas the Eastern European countries many of Eastern European countries became states after the dissolution of the European empires. Also, the Western European countries were never part of the socialist socio-economic system, whereas many Eastern European countries were part of that system, and that has a lot of imprints on these societies. In addition, many countries of the Western Balkans were affected by armed conflicts in the late 20th century, while the rest of Europe enjoyed relative peace since the end of the Second World War. But although the past of the Western Balkans in many ways differs from history of the rest of Europe, there is no denying that our history is common, and that the Western Balkans remains a constituent part of the European continent, and we share altogether numerous political, economic, cultural, security, and other interests with the EU. Nonetheless, the European common ground is being tested by the increased influence of other geopolitical players in the region. It is therefore in the vital interest of the EU to keep strengthening ties with countries of the Western Balkans with an aim to their inclusion in the EU. If the EU is to become a functioning whole, consolidating the European continent, it needs to function as a whole. It needs to breathe with both parts of the lungs, with the western part and the eastern part, and only this will make it a healthy, dynamic, and strong organism. With this, I would like to proceed to the discussion with you, distinguished panelists, and just say that, of course, our panel is quite extensive, and that is because we wanted to bring a very rich and diverse debate to our audience. However, this puts some time constraints on our proceedings, and I would like to ask you to limit yourselves to 3 minutes of your replies. We're going to make 2 rounds of questions, and of course, if there's going to be a need to reply, that is also going to be tolerated and accepted. We're not going to take any direct questions from the audience because of that, but we can take questions through our Twitter, and our Twitter account is #BSF2021. You have it there in the corner. So if you wish to ask a question from the audience, please do so by tweeting us. Let me begin with the first question, which is a general one, and then I will proceed to individual questions which are going to be more tailored to each one of your countries. So, the enlargement process is currently lacking political will, and we need actually to take a step further in that respect. But let's take a step back in this discussion and ask ourselves the following question for EU institutions and countries. What is the added value for you when the Western Balkan countries become EU members? And for Western Balkan countries, what beneficial characteristics can you contribute to the EU upon becoming its members? So this is the general theme. And let me start with Prime Minister Janša. Prime Minister Janša is also the host of this meeting. Slovenia is the host of this meeting. And you also hold the presidency of the Council of the EU. Slovenia holds this presidency. How is the process of enlargement seen from the perspective of the presidency of the EU Council? And what kind of leadership can Slovenia exercise in this respect?
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for participating to this panel. Actually, we started this debate even during our first panel after the opening when we discussed the future of Europe. And the question of enlargement is the question of the future of Europe. You spoke in your introductory speech about the Western and Eastern Europe. Well, when the European Union was created, the founding fathers didn't speak about the West and East, they speak about Europe. Europe whole and free. And the enlargement of the European Union is a tool to fulfill this goal. And we are not yet there. Maybe it's normal that representatives of those countries which were part of Big Bang, the last wave of enlargement, are more supportive toward this process, because we know what does it mean. We know what does it mean from our own experience. We know what was before and what is now. We know that despite all troubles we are facing now, as European Union, all differences we are trying to solve, this is something new. It's something we fought for, and we believe that the original idea of the founding fathers of the European Union has to be fulfilled. And we can also answer on your question, what's the benefit of us who are already members of the European Union if Western Balkans are joining, or the countries from the Eastern neighborhood which are waiting for the EU membership? I think that first benefit is that we are fulfilling this fundamental framework which was set by the founding fathers. And we can also put opposite question. What would be Europe or European Union like after 10 years if we don't fulfill, if we don't go, if we don't follow this path? What kind of crises are there? What kind of neighborhood we have? So it's obvious, and this is why I forgot during the first panel to mention that there was, I think, Bulgarian presidency, Croatian presidency. They both wanted to put forward the enlargement issues on the agenda during their semesters of leading the Council of the European Union. But of course, there were different crises, and during the last period, pandemic prevented us to deal with enlargement as a priority. So we, as somebody said during the morning session, we just dealt with the crisis management. Now it's time to focus to the strategic issue. And somehow when we started this debate about the future of Europe, it's natural that the fulfilling of the original idea of the Europe whole and free is coming on the agenda, and well, the tool to fulfill it is the enlargement. So it's obvious for me. It's a strategic question. It has to be on the European agenda all the time. I remember when we were in the waiting room, then the enlargement was first topic on the agendas of all high meetings of the European institutions. Then they disappeared, and we had been facing a stalemate. Remember that regarding Western Balkans, the decision to take all those countries into full EU membership was taken at Thessaloniki summit at 2003, 18 years ago. So it's high time to deliver, and during our semester we will do our best to make at least some steps forward.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to hear this renewed commitment to the process of enlargement. Let me now turn to Chairman of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mr. Komšić. Bosnia and Herzegovina has always been a multi-ethnic country, and you have a long tradition of tolerance and multi-ethnicity spanning over centuries. How can you make a paradigm shift from the constituent peoples of Bosnia, that is now a constitutional category, to the multi-ethnic dimension also at the constitutional level and at the societal level?
Dakle, prije svega, I'm sorry, I will proceed on my language. Prije svega ja želim da zahvalim organizatorima ovog foruma, pogotovo što su jednu ovako važnu temu stavili pred ovakav skup, što nama sa Zapadnog Balkana govori da su se možda alarmi upalili u Europi i da Zapadni Balkan ne treba ostavljati po strani i čekati da se vidi šta će se desiti.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this forum for finally putting this topic at the forefront as one of the main topics of discussion, because it seems to me that finally, perhaps in the European Union, the alarm bells have started ringing, and it is becoming a realization that the topic of the enlargement, including the countries of the Western Balkans, is something that should not be delayed any longer, and that it should become a topic of the priority for discussion.
A što se tiče vašeg pitanja, oprostite ako se vratim malo u istoriju. Tačno je da je Bosna i Hercegovina uvijek bila multietnička, multikulturalna, multikonfesionalna zemlja. To je jednostavno proizvod vremena i prostora na kojem mi živimo i vremena koje je prolazilo preko prostora Bosne i Hercegovine.
To go back to your specific question, it is a fact that Bosnia and Herzegovina is a multicultural, multi-ethnic country, and this is simply the product of time and the changes that have passed through the time and through the territory that Bosnia and Herzegovina has always been in.
To nam je jednostavno donijelo mjesto i vrijeme, kažem, koje je prolazilo preko prostora na kojem mi danas živimo.
So this has been a product and the result of the times and the changes that the times brought.
Kada govorimo o konstitutivnosti, hajde da se vratimo malo opet u istoriju i da se upitamo Šta je to konstitutivnost, odnosno gdje je rođen taj termin konstitutivnost?
Speaking of the constituency and the constituent people, as you've mentioned, let us make a step back into time to discuss the origins of the term and what actually led to the creation of this term.
Dakle, konstitutivnost kao institut u ustavnim sistemima pojedinih zemalja je zapravo, mogu reći tako, izum ili rješenje koje potiče iz Sovjetskog saveza.
Constituency in the constitutions of certain countries is actually something that origins back from the Soviet Union.
Naravno, u tom trenutku to je bio pokušaj tadašnje komunističke partije Sovjetskog saveza da riješi etničke odnose u tako velikoj zemlji kao što je Sovjetski savez jeste bio.
At the time, it was obviously an attempt of the Soviet authorities to deal with the diversity and variety of the constituencies that existed in the Soviet Union, which is obviously a very large and very complex country.
Dakle, nije to kategorija koja je institut koji postoji oduvijek. Institut koji postoji oduvijek.
So this has not been a category always throughout the time. This is not an institute that has always existed. It can be dated to a specific point in time.
Jel vi možete biti multietničko, multikulturalno i multikonfesionalno društvo i bez konstitutivnosti?
It is possible to be a multi-confessional, multicultural, multi-ethnic society and to have constituent people.
Bezbroj je takvih primjera danas u svijetu.
And there are numerous examples of this in the world nowadays.
Mi koji smo živjeli u bivšoj Jugoslaviji znamo da je tu ideju, taj način organizacije države, a i funkcionisanja društva Savez komunista, odnosno Komunistička partija Jugoslavije, gotovo automatizmom preuzela od Sovjetskog saveza kao ideološki sljedbenik.
We who used to live in former Yugoslavia know very well that back in the time the Communist Party of Yugoslavia simply took over as an ideological follower of the Soviet Union as something that was a logical step when it comes to the former Yugoslavia in that period of time.
I to je u onom trenutku dok smo živjeli u Jugoslaviji, takvom društvu, po meni bio vrlo koristan institut za Bosnu i Hercegovinu jer je čuvao Bosnu i Hercegovinu.
This institute at that time, while we still lived in former Yugoslavia, was a very useful one in my opinion because it preserved Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Sorry to jump in. Is it possible now to move to this multi-ethnic category of Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Naravno da je moguće. Moguće je biti multietnički i u društvu i u sistemu, ustavnom sistemu, gdje je osnov sistema i osnov ustava pojedinac, čovjek i zaštita njegovih individualnih prava i njegovog dostojanstva. Zaštitite čovjeku, jednom pojedincu, njegovo sve ono što ga obilježava, njegov identitet. Zaštitili ste zapravo sve što treba u jednom multietničkom društvu.
Now, of course, it is possible to tie this introduction to the multi-ethnic, to the concept of multi-ethnicity. It is actually very simple because once you provide an individual, a single member of the society, a single unit that comprises the society, once you provide one such individual, one such unit with all the rights that belong to this person, you have, in a larger picture, provided the framework for the whole society.
Niko neće u Bosni i Hercegovini biti manje Bošnjak, manje Srbin, manje Hrvat, manje Jevrej, manje Rom, ako se odustane od principa konstitutivnosti.
If we give up on the concept of the constitutiveness, no one in Bosnia and Herzegovina will be a lesser Croat, a lesser Bosniak, a lesser Serb, a lesser Jew.
I okrene se evropskim vrijednostima. To je ono kako vi živite u svojim zemljama, zemljama Evropske unije, gdje je ipak najbitnije individualno ljudsko pravo i dostojanstvo tog pojedinca.
People would rather turn to the universal European values, similar to the way the citizens of your countries have, because the most important thing to every individual are the basic human rights, the rights of this basic unit that I just
Izvinite, završit ću, znam da sam odužio. Da li će se to desiti? Ne ovisi o ovome što ja govorim.
Now, whether this will happen does not depend on anything I am able to say.
To će se desiti kad dovoljan broj ljudi u Bosni i Hercegovini koji glasaju na izborima prepozna to i glasa za takav koncept.
that shift can change when sufficient number of people in Bosnia and Herzegovina who actually vote at the elections and who have a vote recognize this same thinking and recognize this principle and actually make the turn or the switch.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe that's a question for the second round. We can continue there. But thank you for actually bringing everything to the European perspective. I would like to make a question now to European Commissioner Várhelyi, namely, your portfolio comprises the enlargement process and also the neighborhood policy. What is the connection between the two of them? And how do you apply the requirement of conditionality in both areas, as we know that the requirement of conditionality is actually a very important one on the path towards the EU?
Thank you. Maybe let's start with the broader question. You only talk about enlargement process, enlargement policy, but you don't talk about the integration of the Western Balkans into Europe or into the European Union. And I think this is the right concept to discuss. Enlargement is a process. Enlargement has its stages, and it's more of an administrative process than a political. Of course, every step of the way, there are political decisions to be made. However, what we should discuss is how the Western Balkans will become part of the European Union. And that is the integration process, which means integration politically, integration economically, integration in terms of the societies, and also integration in terms of the security architecture. These are the issues for the Western Balkans. So let's not drag down into an administrative debate which decision was taken, which was not, or whether this is slow or fast. But what we know, and I think we have now a fresh example, and not only an example, but also maybe a fresh experience of all of us, which is Afghanistan. Afghanistan is very far away from here, but the Western Balkan is here. And our responsibility towards the Western Balkans is even much higher than in Afghanistan. So we cannot afford to fail. We cannot afford to fail with the Western Balkans. We cannot afford to fail not to address all the integration aspects of the Western Balkans into the European Union. And this is what we should be working on. Integrate them politically, integrate them to the security architecture fully, integrate them in the economy, integrate them in the society. Of course, the enlargement process as such has a transformative nature. And of course, it is meant to create the right initiatives. It's more of a soft power. This morning, we heard a lot about soft power. Soft power is always about influencing, creating the right incentives and motivation in the Western Balkans. But there is one thing you cannot forget, that motivation is also coming from within. There has to be a conviction also on the side of the Western Balkans that it is worth going through all the reforms and all the transformations they have to do for becoming a member of the European Union. And there is a balance. And we have to be very, very determined to keep up that motivation and to make it very clear that the offer that we are putting on the table is genuine. And this is what we should talk about, and why and how we could speed that up. I think Afghanistan teaches us a lesson, that we have no time to waste anymore. We have to get down to business, and we have to make all the decisions that are necessary to move forward. What we see is that the region is economically integrated, almost fully. It is trading 68% of its trade with us. We see that our investors are the biggest investors in the region. We see also that the society is integrating gradually. Europe is using a lot of the workforce of the Western Balkans already. So Europe is reaping the benefit of the integration process of the Western Balkans. Now it is time to turn it around and make the Western Balkans enjoy to the full potential of the integration.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister Kurti, Usually, questions regarding Kosovo touch upon improving good neighborly relations, especially with Serbia. But my question pertains to economy, and that is actually what Commissioner was talking about as well, economic integration. How would it be possible to revive once a very solid Kosovo economy to participate in the EU internal market on an equal footing?
Thank you. Kosovo has stable institutions. The top 3 candidates in our winning list, which got a landslide victory in February this year, now are chairing 3 institutions of the state, namely Madam President, Speaker of the Parliament, and myself. And the democratic process of elections and the democratic result brought some positive economic externalities. For example, in 7 months of this year, comparing to 7 months of last year, exports in Kosovo grew by 63%, business turnover by 30%, and government revenues by 28% without changing fiscal policy. We foresee economic growth of 7.9% of GDP for 2021. Kosovo is a pro-Western country. We never deliberate about EU or NATO. We want to become members there as soon as possible. We will work hard. We believe that EU should be protected and defended. And to this end, we should do both reforms in our country, but at the same time, enlargement of EU. External enlargement of EU and internal reforms in our countries go hand in hand. But I believe likewise a certain reform in EU decision-making system. So bold steps are more likely and easily to see them in the near future. We have taken 2,000 Afghan refugees in Kosovo. We are a poor country, but we believe that when it comes to humanitarian issues, we should not ask why, but just say how. Plus, our partnership with the United States is very important and very strong. I believe that inclusion of Western Balkan 6 into EU will have 2 big benefits for both. First is that the outer border of EU would get smaller by thousands and thousands of kilometers, because Western Balkan 6 is not neighbor of EU. We are surrounded by EU. So the outer border of EU, security-wise, will get much smaller, and in this ways, it would be better for both. In addition, more or less every 3rd citizen of Western Balkan 6 countries is not resident in Western Balkan 6. And generally, they live in EU, mainly in Western Europe. So with inclusion of Western Balkan 6 into EU, our nations and our diaspora would be living in the same entity. And this would be very good for economy.
Okay.
For example, in Kosovo, over 20% of our GDP is comprised out of remittances of our diaspora, who comprise, therefore, a big chunk of our aggregate demand or purchasing power.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And now we're moving to Prime Minister Zaev. You often present North Macedonia as a functioning multi-ethnic and multi-religious society and democracy, of course. What steps are needed to improve, apart from this political dimension, also the economic and social dimensions, social sectors in Macedonia, such as education, health, and economy?
First of all, thank you for hospitality of Prime Minister Janša, President Pahor, Slovenian citizens. Thank you very much for dedicating this panel for enlargement for Western Balkan. Really, I must share with the people here and with everybody that we are, like Albin mentioned it, in the heart of the European Union, surrounded by European Union countries, like island inside. One small country, very good, functional, multi-ethnical, multi-religion and multicultural society with a huge success of this functionality. That is our advantage and our attractiveness normally. Lately, doing a lot of reforms in our path to European Union, and of course built a huge friendship with our neighbors, with Bulgaria and Greece, but also with Serbia, Kosovo, Albania. We became NATO member country, and that increased the security in the region normally. In this direction, all these achievements immediately mean economy, investment, foreign and domestic investment, what directly influence to the better GDP, to bigger salaries to our citizens, creating more pleasant atmosphere of ruling of law, of better education system, better health system normally, and that came also to fulfill our final goal is to keep our young people here in the country, to not go all around the European Union or Western European countries precisely. In this direction, it's not easier to be 16.5-year candidate country. I think that North Macedonia is the country which longest time wait for the next step. 2000, and first we signed agreement for association and stabilization. That was 20 years ago. Immediately after Slovenia, before Croatia. And Croatia celebrated now 7 years, I think, membership of European Union. We are still candidate country and our status is since 2005. And having all that in mind, we really have 12 positive recommendations. We have with consensus decision of all European member countries last year in March. 27 member countries voted for starting accession dialogue, but still we doesn't have opportunity to open first intergovernmental conference, and after that coming screening process and first chapters like clusters through the new methodology. But I want to comment in the direction what you ask. Really, for us is no alternative than European Union. It's like one person who only want to join to the family, and the family is still not ready, and family doesn't accept, and we doesn't have other family. That is our family. And in this direction, what we can do? We can continuing to Europeanize our country, because we choose that is our family because of values. We believe in European values. And having all that in mind, we're continuing our path. Now we develop a lot of regional initiatives like Open Balkan, and that means how to use in the meantime all quality time to improve the quality of life of our citizens, hoping really that the European Union will have enough courage to make only next step. We are aware after 7-10 years, who knows, we will be member countries.
Thank you.
But we need next steps for keeping our motivation that someday we really will be part of our family.
Thank you. Thanks for mentioning family. I think we are all a happy family here on the podium. And I hope we're going to keep in that direction. Although it might be, we are going to have some discussions later on. Prime Minister Morawiecki, thank you very much for coming. You are in a unique position at this panel to present a more in-depth perspective on the EU neighborhood in general. What is, in your opinion, the importance of inclusion of southeastern and the eastern flanks of the European continent into the EU?
First, let me thank my friend Janusz for inviting me here and organizing this very interesting and very important, strategically very important for Europe panel, so that we can present our considerations and send a strong voice to some institutions. Second, I would like to make a little addendum to what I heard as your initial word here, initial statement, sir, around the statehood and the tradition of some of the countries, at least Poland or Czechia or Hungary, have statehood of 1100 years, and some democratic institutions and first steps much before some Western European countries were established and created. So we have this pride and a much longer tradition, and we don't want to be preached by anybody from Western Europe what is democracy, what is rule of law, because we know this best. We fought for rule of law and democracy during the terrible years of communism, so we really know what it is about. These are a couple of initial statements to clarify some issues. But now to your point, I first make a very strong statement on behalf of my government and Poland. I just believe that given the most important challenges which are ahead of us, and I think that in the decade to come, or decades to come, migration, refugees, and so on, this will be the biggest challenge of the European Union, of the United Europe. It is more than obvious to close the completeness of the European Union in its current borders, which means that Western Balkans should get integrated into the European Union architecture as quickly as possible. And 16 and a half years, as Zoran, my friend, said, or other people waiting in the corridor, it is neither here nor there from the strategic perspective. So we have to be very vocal and very clear about how important this is from the strategic perspective of the European Union, for this family to integrate Western Balkans rather than a very distant cousins from Turkey or Russia, not to say about China, to mess around and to be more than present in this region. So it's absolutely in our vital interest to integrate Western Balkans. And the recent phenomena which we see at our eastern border only confirm this way of thinking to me very, very strongly, because we have to have friends at our eastern flank, but we have to have friends or also family members at our southeastern flank. And we know that the maritime border is relatively easier to defend from all sorts of different jeopardies compared to the land border. So much it's even more important for us to make brave steps towards integrating Western Balkans, and to propose for Ukraine, and hopefully in some not so distant future for Belarus, for Georgia and other countries of Eastern Partnership, a real partnership for which we prepare together with Oliver good programs. And I think this is working quite well. But Western Balkans is knocking to our doors, and we have to very quickly take decisions. And I think I have some idea about it, but I understand there will be a second round as well.
Absolutely. Maybe the third round as well. So thank you very much. We're going to a member of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mr. Džaferović. You are a strong supporter of the European and also Euro-Atlantic path of the Western Balkans, including Bosnia and Herzegovina. In this context, you often mention the importance of a credible perspective being given to you by the European partners. What do you mean by a credible perspective?
Ali prije toga dozvolite mi da se zahvalim organizatorima ovoga foruma na organizaciji jedne značajne platforme za razgovor o suštinskim, sudbinskim pitanjima.
Thank you for your question. I would like to, first of all, thank the organizers of this forum for putting this topic in the forefront of discussion and for opening this panel as an opportunity for us to discuss some of the issues of great importance.
Stanovništvo Bosne i Hercegovine ogromnom većinom želi da Bosna i Hercegovina postane članica Europske unije.
Large majority of the population of Bosnia and Herzegovina hopes for Bosnia and Herzegovina becoming an EU member state.
Zašto? Mogli ste, recimo danas iz izlaganja koja smo čuli, recimo od predsjednika Europskog vijeća, da dobijete odgovor.
Why? I think the answers were obvious from some of the previous panel interventions, specifically from the President of the European Council, for example.
Ne znam da li ću ga potpunosti citirati, ali gospodin Michel je govorio o Europskoj uniji sa ekonomskog aspekta, sa aspekta poštivanja sloboda i govorio o Europskoj uniji sa aspekta sigurnosti.
I'm not sure that I will be able to exactly quote him, but Mr. Michel spoke of the European Union from the aspect of the respect of human rights, of the economic progress and the respect of human freedoms.
To je potrebno i mojoj zemlji, to je potrebno i Bosni i Hercegovini. To žele svi građani Bosne i Hercegovine. Žele ekonomski razvoj, žele poštivanje sloboda i prava i naravno žele sigurnost.
Those are all issues the citizens of my country also hope for, and they all wish their rights and freedoms to be respected. They wish for and they hope for economic development, and they hope for security of themselves, their family and the country.
Dakle, Bosna i Hercegovina ima sve one razloge koje su imale druge države koje su ili članice Europske unije ili koje žele da postanu članice Europske unije. Dakle, identične razloge. To su ekonomski, ekološki, socijalni, politički, kako god hoćete, razlozi. Te razloge ima i Bosna i Hercegovina.
So the starting point of all aspirations of the citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Bosnia and Herzegovina as a country, are similar to all those, or identical to all those that citizens in the countries that are already members of the European Union initially had, and they all have to do with the security, economy, freedoms, rights, etc.
Ali postoji jedan jako bitan, jako važan razlog. Ovdje je bilo govora o tome da je Zapadni Balkan, svih 6 država Zapadnog Balkana, da su praktično u Europskoj uniji, ali nisu u institucijama Europske unije, jer su te države okružene državama koje su članice Europske unije. A evo ja ću vam kazati šta mislim da je interes i Bosne i Hercegovine i svih ovih država Zapadnog Balkana kao specifičan interes da postanu članice Europske unije.
So those are some of the same issues that are the same starting point, as I already said. However, there are some additional ones which are specific not only for Bosnia and Herzegovina, but the 6 Western Balkans countries, because there were already some references made here regarding the 6 countries of the Western Balkans being geographically and traditionally European countries that are surrounded by the EU member states. However, we are not members ourselves. So I would like to point out some important reasons that are additional to some of the things that we share with the countries that are members already.
Can you also connect this to credibility of this process?
Možemo to samo da povežemo i za kredibilnost procesa, pa da povežemo.
Naravno. Dakle, vrlo važna stvar je da sa članstvom svih država Zapadnog Balkana u Europskoj uniji relativiziraju neka pitanja koja mi nazivamo balkanski inati.
It is very important to say that the enlargement of the European Union to the countries of the Western Balkans will relativize some of the issues that currently exist, which are sometimes referred to as the stubbornness of the Balkans.
Relativiziraju se ukupni odnosi na Zapadnom Balkanu.
That has to do with the relationships between those countries.
I relativizira se pitanje granica.
And that at the same time would also relativize the matter of the borders between those countries.
Koje su naravno nepromjenjive, sve države imaju svoj suverenitet, teritorijalni integritet, dakle tu nema nikakve dileme, ali članstvom u jednoj široj asocijaciji kao što je Europska unija, to pitanje se relativizira i čini mi se da i život čini lakšim u svim državama Zapadnog Balkana. To je dodatni razlog sa aspekta nas koji dolazimo i iz Bosne i Hercegovine i iz svih država Zapadnog Balkana. Rekao bi da se ovo odnosi i na NATO savez, ali tu države Zapadnog Balkana imaju različite poglede, ali evo ja tako mislim i kada je NATO savez u pitanju.
Those borders that we have, all the countries of the Western Balkans are obviously solid. There is obviously the territorial integrity of all those countries, and this is not something to be brought into question at all. However, the joining of the Western Balkans countries, joining of the European Union, will also relativize this issue that has been an issue that has
the
come
last
up.
sentence in this round, if I can ask you.
Oh, excuse me.
The last sentence in this round, in this reply, if I can ask you, because we have coming to the limit of your time.
Upravo sam mislio da zaključim jednom mišlju koja je jutros već kazana ovdje u jednom izlaganju. Mislim da je to predsjednik Michel kazao.
I was about to close, just to also connect the Euro-Atlantic NATO future of Bosnia and Herzegovina, because of course countries of the Western Balkans have different views of the NATO membership of Bosnia and Herzegovina. But from my point of view, the joining of the Western Balkans countries would also relativize the importance that is given to that point, aside from the borders.
A ona glasi, Zapadni Balkan treba Evropsku uniju, ali i Evropska unija treba Zapadni Balkan. I što prije učinimo to, to će biti bolje za sve.
Something very important, the message that I took from the speech of Mr. Michel this morning was that the countries of the Western Balkans need European Union, but at the same time, European Union needs Western Balkans as well. And I think this is the main message that I can take from that we need to follow.
Thank you. This is a nice transition also to a question I have for Prime Minister Rama. You dealt extensively with the differences between the East and the West in your career as a statesman, as an artist, as an intellectual professor. And you mentioned also that there is a gap that needs to be bridged. How do you see this gap can be bridged?
First of all, let me try to bring some smile in this gloomy atmosphere. Because in the Balkans there is something that I think we should cherish a lot, that we can smile and laugh even in sufferance, which European Unionists are not able to do, really. So someone, yeah, I mean Germans, yes. Someone approached a Euro optimist and a Euro pessimist nowadays, and asked the Euro optimist what was his view of the enlargement. And he said Turkey will enter EU either under North Macedonian presidency or Albanian presidency. And then the Euro pessimist was asked, and he said, of course, they both will enter EU under Turkish presidency. So we have found a way to deal with all this Beckett incarnation through EU. EU is our Samuel Beckett. We are waiting for Godot. I don't know who is Vladimir and who is Estragon, me or Zoran, but for sure, North Macedonia and Albania are like these two people in the Beckett drama, when the one says, shall we go? The other says, let's go. And Beckett says, nobody moves. Of course, the beauty of it is that Beckett can show itself in the European Union through different colors and nations. Lately, he is Bulgarian. But we are here to fight. Why to fight? Because we are not seeking for a license to be Europeans. We are Europeans. Whatever people in the Union might think, whatever people in the Union might say, we are Europeans. And frankly, I am very, very thankful to the Prime Minister here and the President, of course, because finally, in this debate about future of Europe, we are invited. Of course, it's a side meeting. It's not the meeting, because it's very dramatic and funny, frankly, to see the European Union engaging in the debate future of Europe, and we are not invited. They could, at least for kindness, change the name, Future of the European Union. Because if it's future of Europe, we are Europe, and there is no future of Europe without the Western Balkans within the European Union. If the European Union will continue like that, will be not good for us, but will be worse for the European Union, believe me. Not because I'm giving to the Balkans all the weight that we always used to see each other when we were isolated, but because I'm frankly saying that you mentioned the founding fathers in the beginning. And I cannot prevent myself to say, if the founding fathers would wake up and would follow this debate on future of Europe, I think they would think better dead than alive. And I have no proof, but they are turning in the grave. They are turning in the grave. What future of Europe? And debating for what? For like this press in Constantinople when the walls were going down and they were discussing the sex of the angels. So, sorry for being so Balkanic, but this is the great thing of being a European from the Balkans. Because you never lose the sense of humor with your tragedy.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I've not finished because
but you have
at
to.
least here in Slovenia, at least here in Bled, we can take some of the time they did not give us in the future of Europe debate for so long time. Okay, I'll finish with that. Please don't mention anymore the third actors, the third factors, because it's too ridiculous. On one hand, they are saying to us, you love us? Good. They don't say we love you too. They say, you are important for us. We will marry you one day. But until then, nor we can talk together, either you should talk to others. Of course, it's trying to prove our character and our loyalty, but it should not work like that. And nobody is coming to senses. We are not talking about becoming members. What enlargement? When we become members, I don't know, Macron, who is the youngest, will be writing memories. So we are talking about opening accession talks. Talk, just talk.
Okay, Mr. Rama, thank you very much for a lively
I want to take advantage
presentation.
And ask the President of Bulgaria, please, you Bulgarians, don't be purely European Unionist. Be a bit Balkanic. Open the way. Open the way. What are you trying to save there? You are trying to save what? Open the way to talk. Let us talk with them, and then you are like Balkanic. You can be all the time in the way and saying, no, we block here, we block there, we stop here, we stop there. But open the way.
We get the message. Thank you very much.
You got it? Thank you.
We're coming to President Radev in a moment. But just before that, let me also ask High Representative Schmidt. You took your office recently, and you promised a better life to people of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also that you will bring it back to the political agenda of the international community. Now, how do you plan to achieve this?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would say the last intervention showed how lively and vibrant the Balkan is, And I have absolutely to agree with Eddie Rama, as you stated about, I cannot say other thing than failure of the European Union community to think how to deal with the enlargement of European Union towards Northern Macedonia and Albania, and basically to all 6 members of the Western Balkan. So you are right, and we hope and we will work that you will be wrong in future. Not only that we all, European Union is a vivid organization, but that we understand and know that these 6 countries have to come in. This brings us to the society and to the feeling. The Serbian president today has referred to his impression that people in his country and in the Western Balkan, they are losing confidence in the European project. And I think this is why we have coming to Bosnia-Herzegovina and to other countries to deal not only with the carrot in I don't say any year, in the lifetime of Macron and others, to say you will be member of European Union. So this is not the way where we can work with. And exactly this is why I see European Commission has changed, and we are changing, for example, with the Berlin process. You need the people to get a feeling that it is not only cared for them, but they are in the middle, and it's not only about any cabinet moving and talking and deciding. So this is, first of all, we have intermediate steps. Roaming or other steps, these are the way people can understand what the advantage of European Union is, and then will hopefully give a contribution which we need indeed more than probably the Balkan itself. If one looks on the geostrategic situation today, what can be another conclusion for us Europeans instead of saying, please bring them in? Not to easy conditions. Yes, there has to be done a lot, from state of law to economic structures, but this is what the work should be, and in between there must be benchmarks where we can see there is progress to be set. And so I would, in the case of this country, where I'm now the third to talk about Bosnia-Herzegovina, probably
quickly,
you might, unfortunately I have to say I'm not this one who is missing today, as the Bosnia-Herzegovinian presidency consists out of 3 presidents, members of the presidency, as we have 3 constituent people. So this is where we come to the question and to the challenge. I do not understand, and Eddie, I know sometimes in your region, it is the understanding blocking would be a way of politics. No, blocking is not a way of politics. Blocking is a way of being not strong. We're sitting and exchanging arguments and trying to come to solution and development. So they have to be invited all to see first. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, we have the way from Dayton to Brussels, as we say. This is not the way from Dayton 1 to Dayton 2. The way to Brussels challenges a lot of understandings, and it cannot be that there's a thinking of trusteeship regions, like the understanding which we had in former times, that another foreign country cares for a part of a country.
I'm sorry, but we have to move forward because you have exceeded your time. President Radev, you have been challenged. I had a question for you about the geopolitical importance of the inclusion of the Western Balkans into the EU. So this is my question, but feel free to reply.
My dear friend Borut, Prime Minister Janša, dear friends and colleagues, thank you for organizing this forum. It is just in time. A long time we needed all of us together in this Balkan group to discuss openly, because the integration process is a matter of dialogue and consensus. So the name of Bulgaria was sneaking in the air somehow, but Eddie, thank you for finally pronouncing the name of my country. And don't worry.
They all think the same, I'm just saying it.
To be more complex, our good friend Alexander Vucic, who is not a member of the European Union, is invited to discuss the future of the European Union. And I, as presenting a country member of the European Union, I'm here together with you and Zoran to discuss the real issue.
Mr. Radev, this is also on the future of Europe.
Yes.
Absolutely. Enlargement is the future of Europe.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for this. Now, seriously, talking about the accession of the Western Balkans, we should be very careful and having in mind what does it mean? What is the driving factor behind the accession? The procedures or the values? Procedures are fundamentally important. Reforms in rule of law, reforms in good governance, reforms in the economy and social systems, they are a must, of course. But what about the fundamentals of the European Union? European values, human rights, good neighborly relations. They are the pillars which support the European projects. So when we talk about enlargement and the very process, we should not forget about the values, because we are talking about, and Eddie is absolutely right, we are talking about the future of the Western Balkans, of the European Union, but what kind of future? And believe me, Bulgaria is the strongest supporter of the enlargement process. But we would like to see this process and our future stable. We would like to see stable, irreversible integration process. And to secure that sustainability and irreversibility, we must go back to our values. And we have to be sure that our young people will meet absolutely free, without any prejudice, without any hate speech, and knowing about each other by textbooks, excluding any hate speech and any, misperception of the other guys, of the other country. So this is my concern and my ask. And don't forget that Bulgaria is a trusted friend in this process. When the Western Balkans dropped out of the radar of the European Union, Bulgaria was the country to bring back the focus on Western Balkans during our European presidency. Bulgaria is always on the terrain when our brothers in North Macedonia have problems, be it floods or fires as recently, or any other crisis. And we insist, and we are absolutely open for a dialogue. Dialogue is a key for success, and I would like to thank President Pendarovsky and Zoran and Teddy for being open for this dialogue recently. And this is the first very important step.
Okay, thank you very much. This completes the first round. So it seems to me that there are some problems in the background and that we don't actually know what those problems are. My question for this second round would be, let's go into nuts and bolts of this enlargement process and ask certain provocative questions like what is actually wrong with the enlargement process so that it doesn't move forward? Which countries are actually behind this? Is there a political will? Should we move from the consensus decision-making to qualified majority voting when it comes to the enlargement? Are there any other possibilities, like the European Commission has, of course, is monitoring this process, but we have read, let's say, in the publication Bledit Strategjik Times, an article by Prime Minister Kryeministrat, who cannot unfortunately be with us today, who said, well, this process of accession is filled with benchmarks, with technocracy, with some standards which are outdated. Should we improve these procedures on the side of the EU to make this process stronger and more rapid? And I'm just throwing these questions to you. Maybe, Commissioner, you would like to reply, and then anybody else.
Thank you. Before I get mobbed by prime ministers for going very technical, something that they might find boring, let me recall that this commission was the commission that has dragged the enlargement file out of the ditch, where it landed just right before we took office. And it is thanks to this commission that this is, again, a topic for the leaders, because the leaders have been discussing this topic already twice during this commission's mandate. Now, to turn seriously, this is why we have put on the table a new enlargement methodology, something we would like to implement for the first time with North Macedonia and Albania, something that also attracted the political attention in Belgrade and also in Podgorica, and they have also opted in to this, because we have tried to clarify and streamline the whole enlargement process to make it more credible, make it more political, make it more predictable, meaning when you deliver, we deliver. Unfortunately, we're failing on this point, and we should deliver the decision. And I'm hopeful that we will do it very quickly, because it's in everybody's interest to go and do the necessary decisions. Now, of course, the enlargement process is all very interesting when you talk about the administrative process and how to design the whole procedure, but it is meaningless unless the region integrates in real life. And this is why the other part of the renewal of the integration policy towards the Western Balkans was a substantive economic and investment plan for the region. We are proposing roughly around 1/3 of the GDP of the whole region to invest, roughly almost 30 billion euros for the entire region, to come and deliver in the next 4 or 5 years fundamental change on the ground for the people and for the economy of the Western Balkans, to link up the capitals with highways and railways, to phase out coal as a main energy source for electricity production, to bring in renewable energy, to invest into the SMEs, to create an investors' climate that will attract foreign direct investments even more to the region, to bring broadband high-speed internet connections to all over the region. These are the things that people are missing. These are the bottlenecks in front of speeding up the development, the everyday development of the region. And this is what Europe is offering. No one else is offering this. But we are always stuck in talking about processes. But I do hope that when you will see that we start the implementation of this plan already this semester, and you will see big projects coming up, you will see what a difference this integrated policy means that this Commission has put on the table.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister Janša, would you like to make your contribution with regard to this? How can we better our processes of enlargement?
Well, as I said 2 times before today, enlargement is a strategic issue, it's not technical issue. And if we only bring some technical matters in front and show them as excuse not to enlarge, this is just excuse. So this is political issue, it's political decision, and it has been from the beginning. And Prime Minister Rama is right. It's a show of arrogance from us, members of the European Union, putting in front a conference on the future of Europe, speaking on behalf of all European nations. We don't have this right. So I think that you mentioned the real question. The real question, and we are coming back to the enlargement process. I think that when this idea started to implement, Europe whole and free, this is not idea of last century. There were ideas before, but okay, in modern time, the idea was implemented with the creating of the European Union, and the founding fathers spoke about European nations, not about the European states, about European nations, about the right of every European nation belonging to European civilization to have its own right to join the common project, staying the proud nation. Not to enter the melting point, because this is not the way the European integration is able to survive. We all know this. But we are not united about this. And your question was, is there political will for the enlargement? There is political will, but this is not enough. We need consensus. We need consensus for every step, for every major step regarding enlarging. We need consensus. And speaking about consensus, well, you also put this question. We purposely made the debate on this Bledit Strategic Forum this year, speaking about the future of Europe, around enlargement, because this is the future of Europe, to fulfill the original idea. We are not able to accept all our colleagues who expressed interest to participate, but we also received some apologizes from one or two countries which are reluctant toward this process. They didn't come. I would like to have them here to discuss openly what are the reasons. And when we are speaking about the enlargement, we are not speaking about only about the enlargement on new member states. We are also speaking about the enlargement inside of the European Union, for instance, enlargement of the Schengen. This is the issue Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babiš mentioned during the first panel. Bulgaria fulfilled the criteria 10 years ago, all technical criteria, but they are still waiting for the political decision to join Schengen. And it's high time to deliver. And I think now, I will say very openly, it's not on them who are in the waiting room, it's on us who are inside to make steps forward, to decide, and also to put to take those who are skeptical, well, not to press them to change their mind, but to ask them to tell us openly what is the position of their countries on this process, not to make false promises which are only creating new problems. I think we came so far, and we'll try to push this debate during the summit in October regarding Western Balkans, and in December when we will meet with our partners in Eastern neighborhood. And I think this is the main topic we have to debate during the conference on the future of Europe. Not other open issues, technical issues, and so on. And frankly speaking, They are telling us that, well, imagine European Council trying to reach agreement if there is 34 members. I'm now member of the European Council, sitting around the table with Mateusz and other 25 colleagues, third time in my political career, and I will say very openly, it's no difference. Reaching agreement among 27 states, it's not easier than reaching agreement among 34 members. I don't think that, I think that we need to make reform of the European institutions, but this is not the reform of the European institution, is not the excuse for not enlarging. There are other excuses and we need frank debate about them.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, time is putting quite a lot of pressure on us. We are coming to a close, but Prime Minister Morawiecki, very quickly, you raised a hand before, so please, if you can make a very quick statement, and then we're coming to a close.
First observation about the shape of the European Union. You're waiting, our friends from Western Balkans are waiting for so long that there are huge changes within the European Union, so you have to think about two different concepts which are emerging from within the European Union. One is pushing the European Union towards the United States of Europe, integrated, ever-integrating federation, which I think is a kind of utopia. I think it won't work. I think it will be, at the end of the day, very divisive, because we have 27, 33 countries and Brexit in our head as well. So we have to preserve the right of sovereign states to decide about those issues which are not part of the exclusive competency of the European Union, which is quite detailed and the detailed description of those exclusive competencies in the treaties. And the other idea, the other concept is a European Union which is very strong, which is integrating our economic features and areas, and at the same time focusing on security and real issues, real critical issues for the future of Europe. It's no secret I'm voting for the other option, for the second option, and I think that our friends from Western Balkans have to have this in mind as well. Now to those out-of-box options which you invited us to.
But very quickly, please.
Very quickly.
I'm sorry.
Following line of argumentation. Our friends from Western Europe won't let you in, they don't want you in, because they think that the decision-making process is going to be even more difficult. So to some extent, I disagree with Janusz, what he said. So it's better to make serious steps towards integration for all sorts of different reasons which were mentioned here, rather than wait for another decade. And those serious steps could be following. First, Schengen, which was mentioned. It's not only Bulgaria, but also the 6 Western Balkan states should be in. Second is single European market. Third is cohesion policy, because this could be also a boost for economic development of Western Balkans, and I would vote for all of those. I'm not so sure that your states, your countries will always benefit from those, because, Schengen and taking another millions of your good, great brains and so on, not so good. Bulgaria was 9.5 million country 30 years ago, now is 7 or below 7 million. So you have to think it through as well, my dear friends from Western Balkans, but at least such a serious step towards having a cake and eating cake for all of us. Because there are, and you provoked us to this, there are guys, and that's obvious who are they, in Western Europe who are very, very much against starting real negotiations leading to integration of Western Balkans. So thinking about a combination of several factors which will create a real integration momentum would be my suggestion, rather than sitting on our hands and waiting for another decade until some people in Paris or elsewhere agree for yet another stage of integration of Western Balkans.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rama asked for 1 minute, and I give you 1 minute and not a second more.
Just wanted to say that in all the decision-making process and in all discussions about enlargement, there is a big elephant in the room. The founding fathers were driven by idealism and goals. Now the driving is nationalism and poles. So when I say nationalism, I don't mean nationalist governments necessarily. I mean governments and leaders that are scared about nationalism in their own country, and then before speaking about any of us, they look at the polls. Because there is no other explanation that we seem to be too corrupt when there is an election coming in one country, and then after the election has ended, that country says, you are fine. But once we are fine with one country, there is another country that has elections, and so further. And I'm quite sure that after they finish their elections, the situation will be much more positive for North Macedonia, and hopefully they'll not be asked to change the name again in West Bulgaria. Thank you.
Okay. Right, so actually they just informed me we have 5 more minutes. Obviously, debate is very interesting. Would anybody else like to have a statement? Yes, Mr. Radev.
Okay, talking about the accession process, we need to clearly distinguish between EU responsibilities and our Balkan national bilateral responsibilities. And to be sure, Bulgaria is not a doorkeeper. Bulgaria is your friend, very trusted friend and partner. And there are 2 strategies, 2 ways to open the door. The longest way, the longest strategy is to tour all European capitals, all the European institutions, to try and to convince our partners and allies to force Bulgaria to open the door. No, the door is open. And there is another much shorter and winning strategy. The key is in your hands. And we are absolutely open. We are ready. And we invite you for a dialogue. But the key is in your hands, and opening the door depends totally on you, on your own merits, and on the understanding that the very fundament of the accession process is based on the European values and good neighborly relations. And I hope that this is very important step, that all of us are together here, and we will continue our dialogue.
Thank you. Maybe we can also hear from the other side, Mr. Kurti and Mr. Zaev. What do you think as countries aspiring to become members of the EU?
I believe that it would be good to have a tide which will lift all the boats. And a couple of months ago, I've proposed in Tirana summit of Western Balkan 6, CEFTA agreement instead of CEFTA, Southeast European Free Trade Agreement, modeled upon, let's say, EFTA EEA, where all the 6 countries of Western Balkans will move together towards EU. I believe that that is the safest path forward. I don't want to neglect particular negotiations of different countries, but nonetheless, I believe that CEFTA EEA would help a great deal. To this end, 4 things are most important, I believe. In order to have EU funds, but also with EU values, not EU funds without EU values. And in Western Balkan 6, these 4 elements which could bring us really great progress are rule of law against oligarchs, democratization against autocrats, facing of the past against war criminals in power, and the last but not the least important is certain symmetry or reciprocity of minority rights all over the Western Balkan 6 against national hegemonies. So, rule of law, democratization, symmetry of minority rights, and I believe the CEFTA EEA, this EEA-EFTA model could help a great deal. When I say European values, because I've been listening carefully to the previous panel, I don't think that EU values are race and religion. EU values are democracy, human rights, rule of law, civic rights, free market economy, social justice, or better to say, continental European welfare state. These are the European values. It's not race and religion. And one has to be very careful in fighting Taliban not to end up becoming one.
Thank you. Mr. Zaev.
Only to add it in a matter of enlargement of European Union, I think it's the interests of both sides, and both sides can get it, and even get it during the process of enlargement. Was interest of European Union always to find locations for investment, of course to make profit, but for us was interest to have jobs for our young people, bigger GDP, bigger export. Was interest 2015, fight together with the wave of refugees who came from Syria. We was here in a common security policies, acting together like every member country together. Still Slovenian policemen, Hungarian, Czechian policemen are in our border. They are in south border of North Macedonia. Also, always was interest to improve the trade between European Union countries and we, which are candidate countries normally, and because the more than 75% of our trade, maybe in some countries in mine, it's more than 80% of our trade is with the European Union member countries. Probably now will be a new wave of Afghanistan refugees. We are here normally to act together. And all of that is enlargement when it's necessary and when both sides have a benefit of that. Also in the future we can add it in a variety of ways, not only in economic way, not only in security way, but in multicultural way. A lot of things we can give it to be added value to European Union. But really, our dream is European Union. We believe in European values. Sometimes I think we candidate countries, we believe more than European values, more in European values than some citizens in some member countries. They forget how cold is outside and what is the importance of the values. And mentioning the founders of European Union, really sometimes I believe that the European Union leaders forget the intention, the basis intention, why European Union was performed, why it's needed for economic union, why was made European Union. Really, we need to fight with global world. A lot of challenges. We will be more successful if we are together. The process of enlargement must finish. And having in mind everything what's happened between China, United States, other countries, really, it's one argument more that enlargement must be fulfilled and finished as soon as possible.
Thank you very much. I think this brings us now to the conclusion of today's panel, of this afternoon's panel. I think that some messages were very clear that came out from this discussion, and namely, if Europe wants to become a functioning whole, there must be an integration of the Western Balkans into the EU. Differences between the Western Europe and the Eastern Europe, there are some, but similarities are even grander. And actually, we have to work on the similarities to bring the continent together. And in doing so, we all have to do our homework on the side of the EU. We have to work on the political will and on the decision-making process, on the monitoring process. And on the side of the candidate countries, of course, we have to work on the reforms, implementation of European standards, values, and interests. With this, my distinguished panelists, I would like to thank you very much for your great contributions. I think you sparked the light and you brought many ideas into this debate on enlargement. And I have just one announcement to make, which is that, of course, debates about EU and Europe are continuing in Hotel Rikli. So everybody who is interested, and I hope there are many of you, in common values, in diversity and consensus, those were things that we are talking right now as well, you're invited to join our colleagues at Hotel Rikli. But thank you very much again.
Good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon, Mr. Bon. Good afternoon, Mr. Dojan. We are here today for the Bledit Strategic Forum series. It's a new series of the talks, and it's titled Overture to the Future. Act 1 today is Young Voices on the Future of Europe. And we will have conversations with two eminent and important persons. It's our host here, who is State Secretary, Mr. Gaspar Dojan, State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and French Minister of State for European Affairs, Clément Bon. Again, welcome to Slovenia, and good afternoon to everybody. But what we will talk about today, what is really the overture to the future? Basically, we will talk about where we are heading with the European Union. But to see where we are heading in front of the important conference that will start in May, we have to say something where we stand right now. What's the state of Europe? And we can say that in a very tight time, European Union has faced several crises. It went through financial, migration crisis, Brexit. And however, the biggest and the worst crisis situation is still going on, and it's happening right now, and it's COVID-19 pandemic, which affects the situation in a social, economic, political structure, basically all the whole world, Europe, European Union, its members, but also each of us, individuals. And this crisis causes a great dynamism, both in Europe and in relations in the world. Europe is basically with neighborhood, with the international relations in front of the serious challenges. And during these crisis years, the EU has changed, has adapted, has transformed. But this crisis, the health crisis, definitely brings the biggest test on ours. This means European operation, both in a multilateral world that might happen with a new leadership in the United States, or in a space of multipolar player competition. And we have to ask whether it's a true cliche. Is it really takes only a crisis for Europe to act, or can we operate